Sporting Journal Radio, presented by Onyx.
This is Sporting Journal Radio. Thanks for tuning in on this station right here by downloading the podcast, maybe streaming on demand at sportingjournal.com, or maybe you're watching this at YouTube. Thank you very much. I'm Brett Amundson. And, you know, the end of this hunting season depression is starting to set in a little bit. And as people celebrate the new year and begin their resolutions of diets and exercise, I'm wishing for a bit more time in the field. And it seems as though I just never get enough time out there. Fall's just never quite long enough for me, and I can't complain about how much I hunted because I hunted pretty much every day, so I can't really complain about it. I just always want more, and thankfully there are some potential bird hunting trips in the works, including one to South Dakota since their pheasant season runs to the end of January. But will the amount of snow that we've gotten affect that decision? Should these birds and other wildlife be given a break at this point to weather the weather? Thank you very much. See what I did there? Thank you. Yeah, we're going to discuss that and more with Jared Wiklund from Pheasants Forever right now. Jared, how you doing?
Hey, Brett. I'm great. Thanks for having me on, and happy New Year to you both.
Yeah, Happy New Year. Now, I want to talk about Pheasant Fest that's coming up. It's back in Minnesota this year. It's probably about a month away or so, and I want to discuss why people should go to Pheasant Fest this year. But first, let's just jump right into what's happening right now. This weather, it ain't good, is it?
No, if you're a grassland bird, or probably not even just for grassland birds, whitetails, whatever. These first couple of storms that we've had, particularly that first one that lasted for 3 or 4 days with ice, followed by heavy wet snow, followed by high winds and low temperatures. That's a real downer if you're a grassland bird or other wildlife. And I'm not sure about you, but I know I've seen your videos, and I got out last Tuesday before the season ended. There's a significant amount of snow in the pheasant range. Yeah, there's a picture up on the screen there. There weren't any pheasants really in any of the grassland cover, so to speak of. There's enough snow on the landscape. We were hunting south central Minnesota, probably 12 to 13 inches on the ground, just depending where you were, and 5-6 foot drifts from the wind that we had. And the birds already, just going into the new year here, don't have a lot of places left to congregate and get out of harsh weather. So it's definitely a factor that we're thinking about right now, and thinking about our friend Mr. Pheasant. So
yeah, I found, and I kind of felt bad about it because a lot of my late season hunts, I'd be driving around and you'd see all the pheasants along the roads or in the fields, and as I'd pull up to some land that I was going to hunt at, a lot of times I'd be pushing those birds off of wherever they were, if they were feeding, scratching in the snow and feeding those fields, and then they'd fly into cover, and then you'd go chase them. And while I kind of felt bad about it, after about 15 minutes of plowing through those cattails, I didn't quite feel as bad anymore because they could fly over all the hard spots, and then they had little holes that they could tuck into. And I was, as much as a lot of the cattails were filled in, there were a number of places I found where they could tunnel in and run around underneath. Now, not saying that's ideal, of course, but it's definitely better than the alternative of not being able to get underneath and hide out from the elements a little bit. So a lot of my late season hunts involved, just shooting one bird maybe, and I was pretty happy with that. And I'd just go out for an hour or so, kind of in the afternoon and try to get a bird I can. If I could, I'd bring both dogs just to get them both some exercise, let them run around a little bit. But it was interesting. I hunted a couple of times, Jared, where I went into some cattail sloughs. That picture of Mika, I love that shot right there. That bird, Jared, was kind of interesting because we pulled up to a spot to hunt, and there were kind of some birds along the road, on the gravel there. And there was one rooster and a couple of hens, and the hens got up and flew. And I watched the rooster, and the rooster couldn't fly. So I don't know if he'd gotten, dinged earlier with a gun, with a gunshot at some point, or what his problem was, but he couldn't fly. I opened up, I took my old dog Meek out and let her have a crack at it. And she was able to plow through the snow. It was some pretty deep snow. I wasn't sure if she was going to get there. So I actually let Tiny out to see, to go get that rooster and just kind of, more or less put him out of his misery. And Mika did not let the little dog beat her to it. She went out there and got it and brought it back.
Mika.
Yeah. And that was the only
chant.
that was the only pheasant we got that day, actually. So, but he was hurting.
I too have gotten a lot of, man, I'm seeing a lot of pheasants on the side of the road. It's, it's great to see. And I'm like, well, not necessarily, because they're coming out there because they're looking for grit, looking for scratch, looking for food. And the pheasants that I've seen so far, they seem okay. But we have gotten reports, especially that first big blizzard before Christmas, of dogs coming out with frozen pheasants in some locales over pheasant country. And then we did a winter report actually not too long ago about that first storm, and people that were out hunting were finding that the birds didn't necessarily have a ton of fat on them when they were getting field dressed. So little bit concerning, especially with the depth of the snow. Pheasants aren't necessarily like a turkey or some of those other animals that can really dig through deep areas, but rarely does a pheasant starve. They've got a couple different things in their back pocket that they use, not just grain out of a field, but they eat a lot of native sources as well, which can really help them out this time of year.
Well, I've been fortunate that I've been able to hunt around some pretty good cover and food plots, and some habitat that's designed to help wildlife. And the last pheasant I shot this year was the biggest rooster I shot all year, and he was full of fat. He was real healthy.
Good,
but
that's excellent.
A couple of days earlier, I found one dead hen so far. So that wounded rooster and whatever happened to him, I don't know. But I did find one dead hen. But I've seen a lot of birds. Now again, I'm in some pretty good habitat where I get to hunt at times, which made it really interesting, because I walked a huge slough the other day, and it's one that historically has been full of pheasants late season. And I walked the entire thing, and I saw two hens in it. Now, the difference was it's the middle of the day, and I drove around the entire section afterwards, and everywhere I looked in all the fields, there was pheasants out there scratching out in the field. So more or less was just a question of timing for me. But it's this year, the late season tactics, it's if you're going to hunt, it was definitely, you definitely had to employ some different tactics to be successful.
Oh yeah. I've seen everybody, from just focusing on shelter belts, which is where a lot of them are right now, to putting on the snowshoes. I've had a lot of questions from people. Hey, I read an article you wrote a couple years ago about late season hunting in South Dakota, and now that it goes through the end of January, can you give me any tips for going out there? And my biggest tip right now is just you need to take stock of what the of what the snow depths are. I mean, there's a lot of people that live out there that are saying, you're going to have a really, really hard hunt, even if you can get to the birds. By the time you break through all that and make enough noise, a lot of them are going to say, see you later. So I think snow depth really is sort of the name of the game right now for late season pheasant hunters across the range, except when you start, because even Nebraska, northern Iowa, the snow's building up there too. But, Minnesota and the Dakotas and parts of Montana specifically, they've got a lot of snow, and they're getting more from this storm that we're experiencing right now. So yeah, I think it really depends on a person's your physical shape. It's not easy walking through 3, 4, 5 foot snow drifts, and that, and you're a guy that's 2 feet taller than I am. So
and that definitely plays a factor. From when I started pheasant hunting, I'd hear people say that about late season. Oh, you like that late season stuff because you're tall and lanky. And I'd just be like, oh, I just like being out there, and I don't have a problem busting through cattails. And I've hunted with a few other people that aren't quite as tall, or maybe not as in good a shape. And not that I'm in great shape, but they like to pheasant hunt in October. They like to walk grass. And once the snow falls and the cattails become the main habitat, they're done. They're on to ice fishing or deer hunting or whatever.
Late season, we've talked about this before in this show. It's really finding the bedroom next to a kitchen, a place that's got thermal cover once there's snow on the landscape, and if there's food nearby. It's a pretty easy recipe for finding pheasants. And I think that's one of the reasons why people like you and me, and there's plenty of others out there too, that really enjoy the late season. Your dogs aren't overheating, and the pheasants are pretty predictable. they are where we thought they were, as I like to say. So they're easier to find.
Is that kind of channeling Denny Green a little bit? Is that it's kind of they are
they are
who we thought they were. So that brings up a couple of good points, because I've waded through a couple of the online Facebook group debates that have been raging lately about giving wildlife a rest, giving pheasant hunters, giving pheasants a break from hunting. This obviously we're closed in Minnesota now, but before the season ended, and then the discussion of feeding them comes up, and then the discussion of what type of habitat. So I know we've already been going for quite a while, but I want to get into some of those topics, like should people try to feed pheasants this year? And then, what type of habitat is the best for emergency winter cover? And then when it comes to hunting, let's just start right there first. Are there days where you'll say, you're strapping on your orange, you look out the window, it's like, no, I'm not going today. I'm going to give them a break.
Yeah, I think from an ethical standpoint, every hunter sort of needs to make that personal decision. For me, and the guidance that I would give people is like, if there's a nasty storm coming in, and you're going out the day before that and hunting pheasants when they're out, trying to, because they can feel I'm not sure if it's pressure changes or what, but all wildlife, they typically know when those big events are coming, and they're out gearing up for it. So I really don't like hunting pheasants before a huge system, because you're pushing them out of the winter cover where they're at. And whether they get back to that or not, if you are going to hunt them, do it more in the morning and give them the afternoon to sort of relocate to where they need to be. That would probably be the one big ethical consideration. But, hunting late season, especially when conditions are difficult, I think the other side of the coin is, pheasants have a really, really high turnover rate.
Yeah.
Despite whether we've got, historic snow events or not. So, taking the excess roosters out of the population isn't going to hurt anything. It's, if anything, it's protecting the hens more in the winter cover, so they aren't getting kicked out by those bully roosters. So those would be probably the couple considerations I would put out there for folks.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that I've looked at is if there's a storm coming or some sort of event that's going to make it miserable for them, I let them get fatten up and find some cover and ride the storm out. Then afterwards, or if when the weather gets nice, then I guess I personally don't have a problem going after them a little bit, especially late season if you've got a lot of roosters out there. I think it's good to thin them out just a little bit. And then when it comes to obviously food plots are the key, and having a habitat mosaic, which we can get more into in just a second. But when it comes to feeding the birds, now that's another debate that's come up, and I've seen it come up about deer. And obviously nobody recommends feeding deer because of chronic wasting disease. That's been all the news the last few years. But when it comes to feeding pheasants, obviously you don't. When you start feeding wildlife and you feed them to the point where they get dependent on you feeding them, that's obviously not a good situation.
No, absolutely not. And you hit it on the head. Like, I've gotten tons of email, maybe not tons, but I've gotten more than we have in the past 3 to 4 years, because we've had pretty mild winters. Lots of calls from people say like, "Hey, do you guys sell pheasant feeders, or where can I get corn to feed in my backyard and this and that?" And there really isn't a scenario where Pheasants Forever, Quill Forever even suggests feeding, even in like a historic event, I guess they called that first big snowstorm we had this year just before Christmas. Unfortunately, there's many well-intentioned people out there who provide corn or other grains as food sources, and they actually harm pheasants more than they can help. Number one, feeders really give predators a focus point similar to a bait pile, and it's really rare for pheasants to starve, as we talked about at the beginning of the show. They've got a lot of things in their back pocket that they can focus on. Like ragweed, for instance, giant ragweed, where they can find it actually has more caloric intake than corn or beans, and a lot of people don't know that. Where you have ragweed patches, man, the pheasants really key in on that stuff. But that's just one example. But poorly placed feeders that can draw pheasants out and away from protective winter cover. They cause birds to congregate and expend energy competing for food. And then the one point that you looked at right now, disease transfer, particularly of avian flu, and how many waterfowl that's killed on this continent, is another consideration that deserves I think a little bit of caution. And it is essentially a bait pile. So like you pointed out, in the age of CWD, it's illegal in a lot of cases where people live. So we really don't focus on that. Food plots, on the other hand, they're a function of habitat, right? If designed correctly, they can really take care of the issue. So square or block designed food plots of 3 to 10 acres are preferable. You might as well design something. If you're relying on feeding's not going to save a whole pheasant population. You got to have the habitat elements, and food plots are part of that. They can play, especially in the type of weather we're having now. They can be really good. But unfortunately for grassland birds, I think, and sometimes I don't even like saying this, but the harsh reality is that they're designed to die. They're designed to die with high turnover rates. Yet, they can flourish, as we saw, from this spring and this fall, when conditions are right. They can really flourish. So I think people should keep that in mind and plan ahead of time.
Well, pheasants live 2 years, maybe 3 years, so they are turning over pretty quick, and that's why the conditions in the spring and having that nesting cover is so important. That winter thermal cover, though, when you're designing. I think, did David just show up? I think David's joining the show here in a second. That's why the dogs are barking.
All good.
When you say you've got 80 acres and right now it's just black dirt, and you're in charge of managing it, Jared, and you're going to plant some grasses, maybe a mix, and then you're going to be able to put a couple food plots in. And what are you going to do about winter cover and thermal cover? Like when people talk about having, trees on the landscape, and when you talk about prairie restoration, that usually involves trees coming off the landscape. There's a difference I was reading this article from Pheasants Forever, and there's a difference in tree height, basically, versus say tall trees versus woody cover, which would be more of that shorter willowy shrub type cover. What's the idea when if you were designing a landscape and you want to put some thermal cover in and some food plots, what are you going to do?
Yeah, I think number one, I'd talk to a Pheasants Forever, Quail Forever biologist instead of a PR guy. But this,
sorry,
no, you're good. This specific article, pheasants don't grow in trees. I think it's probably one of the best articles ever written. It got a lot of comments online from folks, and really, it's really based on research. So when you look at trees in general. Grassland and trees, as I mentioned in the article, have really waged war for centuries in North America here. But when it comes to our favorite upland species, pheasants in particular, undisturbed nesting cover and the associated nesting success with that remains the absolute choke point for upland birds. We just don't have enough of it. Are we having a really bad winter right now? Certainly. In some places we are. In some of the drought-stricken places, we're getting some moisture back in the landscape, which is good. But we're doing a podcast here, I think, at the end of the week that includes a couple different people, including Rachel Bush, who's my colleague and staffer up in North Dakota. And I really think she says it best about, that tree rows often break up big blocks of grassland habitat, inviting predators to an upland species smorgasbord, as she says. And, those trees that we hunt as humans, we're a predator. That's the same thing other predators are using too. So I think looking at it from that standpoint, a lot of hunters fail to make that distinction between trees, stuff that grow higher. 15 feet is really the deck that we use. If it's higher than 15 feet, you need to be looking at more desirable woody cover. So things like shrubs like dogwoods, wild plum bushes, 9-bark. There are certain types. We do give a bad rap to, cedar trees and those types of things. But some of them are genetically changed now so that they really can't spread onto the landscape. Short stature, evergreens, but making a nice tree row with a minimum of 15 rows, because a lot of people are like, well, I've got this really nice 3 to 4 row shelter belt of all the right native species. Well, that's not stopping. That's not giving a place for upland birds to spend a winter, and really bad ones like we're having now, because that's all filled in with snow. So making sure you do it right, reading some of these articles, reaching out to a Pheasants Forever biologist, and then again on the food plot side, putting it next to your really high thermal or winter cover that you have, along with making it 3 to 10 acres. It's got to be big enough to sustain wildlife through an entire winter. Otherwise, it's a moot point.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'm a little bit different than the average pheasant, but during that blizzard, when I was standing behind my grove, it sure was a lot nicer than standing on the north side of it. And there's some tall trees in there, and then a row of tall pines, and then some corn and soybeans along the side of that. So.
And there's even programs out there through U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and some of our other partners, and you have to be able to apply for those, and have the right conditions, soil types, and whatnot. But really those wetland areas that have that desirable cattail cover that provides real thermal cover, like you were saying about when it's -40 and blowing outside, like it had been just a couple weeks ago. Inside those areas where pheasants can get in there and kind of create their own microclimates, it's above 0 degrees, and it really helps with the amount of calories that they're having to burn to keep warm and survive during the winter.
So thermal cover is important. Just having the right thermal cover is important, because out here in western Minnesota, a lot of trees are coming out, and I'm hearing about it from a lot of the hunters and a lot of the pheasant hunters, a lot of the deer hunters too, are worried about it. So there is some research going into it. Do I always agree with it? No, but I don't always agree with everything the DNR does either. But and I don't know if anybody does.
Looking at it from the standpoint of a pheasant, I think is the biggest thing. Like if you're a pheasant hunter, deer hunters, like you can't really speak to that. I'm a below average deer hunter. I'll tell you that. I'll tell you that straight up. But elm trees, cottonwoods, Siberian elm, buckthorn, prickly ash. There's a lot of undesirable species out there where people see those getting taken out and think like, oh, it's going to hurt. It's going to hurt our upland bird populations. Those types of cover don't do a darn thing for pheasants. So that's why we're focusing on native species and putting in shrubs or woody cover as opposed to trees. So anything that's above that 15 to 20 foot in height, you're asking for avian predators, foxes, skunks to move in and use those tree lines to get into your nesting cover. And at the end of the day, it's going to be a detriment to your pheasant population more than if you wouldn't have taken those out.
Yeah, you can take out every. Oh, look at that picture. That's a good one right there.
Oh, look at that.
You can take out every cottonwood tree. I mean, me and my buddy Jason Markla last year sat and tried to eliminate all the little volunteer cottonwoods that he had going up in his grass. Man, those things spread like crazy. And those trees I'm definitely not a fan of at all out there.
No, so. I mean, it and you've done it. So like if you're taking those out, all it takes is 1 or 2 years, and you've lost control of your primary nesting habitat from letting those trees go. Because those get 2 inches or bigger, sort of at chest height. Those are turning into trees really, really quick. And pheasant nesting success just dive bombs when you have that.
You brought up skunks and nest predators like raccoons. The raccoon population, I think, is crazy right now, and I don't think that gets enough discussion. When Coy Loeffler and I took a trip down to Missouri and back this spring to do a turkey trip, we saw more raccoons than maybe we've ever seen out there. And granted, we were spending a lot of time driving around and covering a lot of miles, but there were raccoons all over the place. What do you think we can do to try to control the population of those nest predators a little bit?
Well, one of the things to control the predators themselves is dilution. So like it's putting more habitat on the landscape, because a lot of people talk about like, well, I've got these linear buffer strips, and I'm seeing a lot of raccoon activity. Well, if you're spreading those creatures out on a larger landscape and putting more habitat down, you're going to have less of an issue. I would say the other one is trapping too. One thing trapping, I think, is a topic that brings a lot of concern from upland hunters and bird dog owners, especially, right? Because there's that issue between, maybe not issue, but bird hunters running into traps during the season. And actually at Pheasant Fest this year, We've got just a hardcore trapper, Jerry Snetzinger, who's been doing it for 40 years. He's called the Trap Doctor. He's coming to give an awesome presentation about what you can carry with you in the field to make sure that you're not running into any issues and that trappers and upland hunters can work side by side. But outside of that, Pheasants Forever really recommends dilution. I mean, it's just putting quality habitat on the landscape, spreading out those predators so they aren't given linear strips to go and focus on. And, coyotes typically have been public enemy number one for upland hunters. Like that's the reason why we don't have grassland birds. And at the end of the day, coyotes are eating your raccoons. There's not much that eats a skunk other than maybe a stupid dog, or owls are about the only thing. They don't have olfactory sense. They can't smell, so they're about the only thing that will that I've seen from research out of Iowa State that'll actually eat them.
I didn't know that.
Yeah,
that's interesting.
Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah, dumb dogs and owls.
Owls.
My dogs have been there. I digress.
I think everybody's has. Yeah.
Yeah, but I think just having a quality habitat plan in place, and Pheasants Forever, Quail Forever, we're here to help with that.
Well, I know there's those dog proof traps you can get for raccoons too.
Coon cuffs.
Yeah.
Cuffs, they're called.
Could help kind of control that population a little bit without putting your dog in danger. All right. Well, you brought up Pheasant Fest because I want to tell people they should watch for the billboards around Minneapolis. Maybe the greatest billboard ever in the history of billboards for Pheasant Fest this year.
I think so. I believe that's a picture you took, correct?
It is. It's a picture. That picture too, and I don't think that's the one on the billboard, Dan. But if you go to the Pheasant Fest, pheasantsforever.org, you'll see it on the top. There's a banner there that'll scroll across. But I just went for a walk with the dogs one day, just with the camera during the hunting season, and they got real birdie on the edge of these cattails, and that rooster got up so close to me, I almost put the camera up just to defend myself because it was flying right at my face.
Happens.
Hit the shutter button, and thankfully I got a really fast shutter, and it took a couple of pictures that were surprisingly in focus, and that's the one that's on the billboard and that's on the website and all that. So I appreciate you guys using it.
Yeah, that photo is going to be strung out all over Minnesota, even over into Wisconsin. We've got 45 billboards that are going up right now to advertise for National Pheasant Fest and Quail Classic, which is coming to the Minneapolis Convention Center February 17th through the 19th. And if you've never been there before, or you haven't been there in a few years, it's the largest gathering of upland hunters and bird dog owners in North America, in the world. And it really is a fun, whether you're trying to figure out a training regimen for a new dog you might have. We have some of the best bird dog trainers in the country. You want habitat recommendations. We've got biologists standing by that'll look at your property on an aerial photo and provide what you need to have a successful grassland habitat plan in place. There's a lot of other things there as well. We're going to be discussing the new farm bill coming up. The North American Grasslands Conservation Act, Recovering America's Wildlife Act, big legislation that can really be a turning point for pheasants and quail and other grassland wildlife. So lots of things to do, over 400 exhibitors, and I hope everybody will come out and join us at National Pheasant Fest and Quail Classic on February 17th through the 19th.
It's a fun show to do, and I know it travels around, so it only comes back into Minnesota every few years. So it's nice for people that can't or don't aren't able to travel to it in other states. If they're here in Minnesota, this is a nice and close opportunity for them to go to it. It's a lot of fun, and if you it's a chance to sit around and talk hunting with your buddies, and then there's so much advocacy done in the political, realm when it comes to the farm bill and some of these other bills. And sometimes it's hard for somebody that doesn't live and breathe that stuff. Sometimes it's hard for them to comprehend and wade through all the political speak to understand what's truly going on there. So it's nice to be able to go to an event like this and speak to some of the people that it's their job to understand the ins and the outs of these bills, and learn a little bit more about what it means and how important it is to find ways to support these things.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I think advocacy is underrated in this country. Yeah. You need to have a voice for wildlife, and that comes through policy. And we've got 3 to 4 just great people that are in Washington, weekly, working on those types of things. So we're hoping to have, we don't have, names down yet, but we're waiting for confirmation from some big time legislators that hopefully are going to be at our event. We're looking at having some top brass from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. The Minnesota DNR is going to play a big part this year. They've got a large booth. If you want to come and learn about some of the awesome relationships or partnerships that we have with them, come on out. But everything from guns and gear to bird dogs to habitat management. We've got some banquets that are already sold out, by the way, which is awesome in the evening. But one thing people can look forward to as well is the Thursday night before the show starts. So I believe that'll be the 16th, Thursday evening of the 16th. We've got an Upland Film Festival. We're going to be bringing 5 different films to the Poorhouse in downtown Minneapolis. It was a wonderful event last time, and if you want to meet some like-minded people, that's a great place to do it. So we've got some short films from Project Upland and a whole bunch of different partners. So I would encourage people to get a ticket for that because it's going to sell out pretty fast.
Yeah, that'd be fun to go to. And then, Dan, one of these years we got to make a film for that. Got to get that done.
Yeah, do it.
Yeah,
I'd love to see it.
For sure. All right, Jared. Well, where can we find out more about Pheasant Fest? And then if we want to learn more about, putting in the proper habitat or learning more about trees on the prairie and all of that good stuff, where can we find all that info?
Yeah. So you can go to pheasantsforever.org, pheasantsforever.org, or if you want to learn more about Pheasant Fest, it's just pheasantfest.org. We've got all sorts of, you can click on the stories tab at pheasantsforever.org and check out all the great stories. Cooking recipes we have. Kang Yang at Minnesota Hunter just put up one for pheasant curry. That's a real winner. So I encourage people to go on there and check it out, and hope that you'll join us here in just a few months for National Pheasant Fest and Quail Classic.
Do you know who's going to be speaking yet or anything, or doing seminars?
Seminar schedule is going to go up here shortly. We've got, as far as dog trainers go, we've got some of the best ones throughout the country. Purina, Sport Dog are going to be there, and all the top trainers that go with them. So people can watch for a full rundown of that. That'll be on the site here. Due dates for some of our seminar stuff were just a few weeks ago, and it's going to be put up here around January 6th and afterwards. So you can watch for that, and we're going to have the show guide on there as well here shortly.
Very good. The 2023 National Pheasant Fest and Quail Classic, February 17th to 19th, Minneapolis, Minnesota. Jared Wiklund, Pheasants Forever. Thanks for the time today on the show.
Thanks, Brett. Appreciate it.
Hear more at sportingjournalradio.com or wherever you get podcasts.
It's ice fishing season and time to plan your trip to Riverbend Resort on Lake of the Woods. Stay at the Lakeside Resort along the Rainy River in one of their new cabins and enjoy delicious meals and hot or cold beverages in the Miles Lab Bar and Grill. Or stay in one of their comfortable sleeper houses on the ice, complete with a TV, stove, and lots of walleyes right beneath your feet. You also have the option of staying at their motel, the Walleye Inn, located in Baudette. Book your ice fishing trip to famous Lake of the Woods today at riverbendresort.com. That's riverbendresort.com.